But first, a KXAN investigation important for you and your family. It's a heart-wrenching decision many of us have to face one day, trusting someone to care for our aging loved ones. Tonight, the state agency watching over places like nursing homes and retirement communities admits to KXAN it made a mistake, even broke the law.
Investigator Brian Collister reveals sexual abuse allegations inside a local assisted living facility.
She's very warm, very much a people person.
Alzheimer's disease and dementia took their toll on this Austin woman's mother. She asked we not reveal her face or name.
It tears you up. It's hard to watch that and know that, there's nothing you can do.
It got so bad in 2011, a doctor and judge ruled her mother incapacitated, unable to make decisions for herself, and appointed a legal guardian. Created by the Texas exes, Longhorn Village seemed the perfect place for her mom, now in her 70s, to get the assisted care she requires. But a few months after entering Longhorn Village, she noticed a change in her mother.
She became more and more distraught. She talked about wanting to move. She became more and more withdrawn and upset.
The woman's legal guardian and family claim in this lawsuit she was sexually assaulted in 2012 by a male resident, described as a sexual predator, not just once, but twice, and that the male resident's sexual activities were known to the administration, but nothing was done to protect his victims.
You believe your mother was sexually assaulted in that nursing home?
I do. I do believe that she was sexually assaulted.
She's allowing us to show you her mother's face because she wants you to see this, what the family describes as a dramatic decline in the months after the alleged sexual assaults.
I'm just heartbroken. She really suffered a lot.
In response to the lawsuit, Longhorn Village denies any wrongdoing. Michael Little was Longhorn Village's Director of Healthcare Services at the time of the incident.
What was the obligation of Longhorn Village to its assisted living residents?
Objection form.
To ensure the prevention of abuse and neglect.
In this videotaped deposition, Little denies knowing she had a legal guardian, even though Longhorn Village's current director admitted in a later court hearing a copy of the court order was in her medical file.
Didn't you think when there was an allegation of sexual assault that the medical file should have been reviewed for the alleged victim of that assault?
Based on the information we had, we didn't look at it as sexual assault.
Okay, so you didn't review the medical file after the allegations of sexual assault came up?
No.
He also admits they did nothing to stop the male resident, who we're not naming since he has not been charged with a crime. Dr. Carmel Dyer with the Texas Elder Abuse and Mistreatment Institute says caretakers should know when there's a guardianship order, that person cannot make their own decisions.
If a patient has been ruled incapacitated, they cannot participate in consensual sex, period.
And why is that?
It's because they don't have the ability to make an informed choice.
This lawsuit also claims that Longhorn Village did not report the alleged sexual assaults to state investigators as required by law. They didn't even tell the family. It was a nurse at Longhorn Village who eventually reported the case on her own to investigators here at the Texas Department of Aging and Disability Services.
We all knew that her mental capacity was not one that could consent. We all knew that.
Longhorn Village fired that nurse, Kathy Yessian, seen here in a video deposition. She and another employee who were fired sued for retaliation. Longhorn Village agreed to settle both of those cases, but admitted no wrongdoing. Longhorn Village's executive director declined an interview about the sexual allegation, but said in an email the state found the complaint was unsubstantiated and no deficiencies were cited. Based on this thorough independent investigation by the state regulator, Longhorn Village believes the pending lawsuit is entirely without merit. But KXAN has uncovered the state's investigation was far from thorough, something a spokesperson for the Department of Aging and Disability Services admitted in an interview just today.
It was a failure. It was something that needed to be done, that wasn't done.
The state's investigator said in a 2012 court hearing he didn't even see the guardianship order, and it wouldn't have mattered to him anyway. He determined what happened was consensual sex, and the complaint unsubstantiated.
In this case, your investigator reviewed the medical file, but was not aware that there was a guardianship order. Why not?
Correct. And we don't know why not. We're reviewing the case now to determine what, if anything, could have been done differently.
And KXAN also discovered the Department of Aging did not follow the law. It's required to report all allegations of abuse and neglect to law enforcement.
Initially, you told us that this agency reported this case to law enforcement, but we found that was not the case. Why didn't it get reported to law enforcement?
That's a question we're trying to answer at this time. It was not reported as it should have been.
The fact no one told them and nothing was done leaves the family feeling like the system failed them.
In this case, the guardian wasn't notified and the family wasn't notified, but they should have been notified.
Absolutely.
Frustrated and disappointed. It's just hard to imagine that there'd be that kind of callous approach to someone's care and their responsibility.
Now, including these allegations, the state has investigated a total of 3 abuse and neglect complaints at Longhorn Village. All 3 were found to be unsubstantiated. We also checked further into these kinds of complaints the state has investigated over the past decade. There have been about 17,000. The state ruled most of those, almost 90%, were unsubstantiated. Now, Shannon and Robert, you might be thinking as a family member who has someone in a facility like this, has there been a complaint at that facility? We're making that information available for you online at KXAN.com. You can go and look it up right now.
So you mentioned in your story that Longhorn Village fired a nurse as this case played out.
Yes, and we're going to hear from her coming up at 10 o'clock tonight. We're also going to hear about my conversation with the male resident who still lives at Longhorn Village.
So, Brian, I think a lot of people might be wondering if I have a family member or a loved one in a facility like this and I'm concerned something like this may have happened to them, what do I do?
First thing and most important thing is to call law enforcement and report it. You can also go to KXAN.com. We've got resources there that you can click on links and get some help.
We first uncovered how the state agency responsible for protecting elderly patients at assisted living facilities did not do its job, even broke the law.
A Texas lawmaker saw our investigation and is now promising action to help better protect your loved ones. KXAN investigator Brian Collister is here now with this latest development.
Robert and Shannon, because of our investigation, the state has finally notified the Travis County Sheriff's Department of an alleged sexual assault at an assisted living facility. That report comes more than 2 years after the incident and was only made to law enforcement on May 20th. The day after our investigation first aired. That's something that caught the attention of this lawmaker.
I think that's a major failure.
Austin State Representative Elliot Neistat says he never again wants to find out the state did not do its job when investigating allegations of elderly abuse.
This is something which I will be working with DADS, the Department of Aging and Disability Services, and the Commission to make sure that they know this is unacceptable.
Unacceptable to the vice chair of the House Public Health Committee, what KXAN uncovered, that this woman was allegedly sexually assaulted by a male resident here at Longhorn Village in 2012. What makes it an assault, according to this lawsuit by the woman's family, there's no way legally it could have been consensual sex. You see, when a doctor decides someone is incapacitated, no longer capable of making their own decisions, a judge appoints that person a legal guardian. Longhorn Village's current director admitted in a court hearing they had the guardianship order for this woman. But the director at the time of the alleged assault and state investigator who checked out the complaint both say they never knew about it.
According to the investigation report, our investigator did not know that there was a guardianship in place in this investigation.
And why was that?
I don't know. We can't answer that just because we don't have any information.
While the agency tries to figure out what happened, the representative says he'll take action now to close a glaring loophole in the law.
Do you think guardianship orders should be required to be in the medical file, that should be required to be viewed?
I do, without question.
Neistat, who practices guardianship law as an attorney, says these vital records should be the first thing a state investigator sees.
The rules don't specifically require a nursing home or assisted living facility to have a copy of the guardianship order in the file. This will be changed either through the rulemaking process or legislation that I will introduce.
Representative Neistat says a larger issue is the lack of funding from the state for Health and Human Services. Now, the Texas Health and Human Services Commission tells us today that it looks forward to working with the legislature and the Sunset Commission to strengthen the regulations of our state's long-term care facilities. Also, officials there told us they're reviewing the Longhorn Village case and its own investigative processes at this time. You believe your mother was sexually assaulted in that nursing home?
I do. I do believe that she was sexually assaulted.
A KXAN investigation into a family's allegation. Someone sexually assaulted an elderly mother at an Austin assisted living facility, Longhorn Village. Our investigation uncovered more problems in the system that's supposed to protect your loved ones. Last May, we revealed the state agency responsible for investigating that case broke the law by not contacting law enforcement.
As a result, the state launched an internal review of that case and hundreds of others. KXAN investigator Brian Collister broke this story and now has more on the fallout.
Thousands of senior citizens live in nursing and assisted living homes across Texas. When a report of alleged abuse, neglect, or exploitation comes into the Department of Aging and Disability Services, or DADS, the law says the agency must notify law enforcement within 24 hours so it can conduct a criminal investigation.
They broke the law. I think people should be concerned about this.
The American Association of Retired Persons says it's concerned DADS never reported more than 1,500 of these cases. That's 78% of all cases in just the last 2 years.
It's appalling, quite frankly. I mean, folks are depending on the state agency that licenses and regulates these facilities to follow the laws and the regulations, and the fact that the agency isn't following a law that's designed to protect these folks is appalling.
It's unacceptable, and I want to find out why. Why is it happening?
State Senator Jane Nelson helped pass legislation to make the reporting a requirement. And she says she didn't know the state wasn't following the law.
Why not? Why didn't they do their job? I mean, I can pass legislation, but I expect that our state agencies will certainly abide by the laws that we pass.
To find out why not, we went straight to the top, to the man in charge at DADS.
Your agency is required by law to report allegations of abuse, neglect, and exploitation to law enforcement within 24 hours. But in more than 1,500 cases, you didn't do that. Why not?
It appears that we did not do a good enough job of communicating that obligation out to our staff. Once it came to our attention, once your investigation brought it to our attention, we took action.
By notifying law enforcement agencies across the state of the cases it's failed to report, even those where their own investigators substantiated claims of abuse according to these DADS reports, including in Waxahachie, where a resident was found deceased outside with severe burns on his arms. In Fort Worth, staff failed to contact emergency services in a timely manner when resident complained of having a heart attack. The resident died. And in Bedford, due to facility neglect, the resident sustained a burn with blister the size of a cantaloupe. Dad says law enforcement was eventually notified by facility staff or family members in many cases, although it cannot say exactly how many. Even so, state investigators are still required to report every allegation they receive within 24 hours.
This was an important procedural requirement, and it did take place in many cases, but in many cases it did not.
It didn't take place in 78% of the cases.
There's no question that this was systemically an area where we fell down on.
And failing the same senior citizens they're supposed to be protecting.
We need to know numbers. We need to know every case should be reported. So we know, what's happening, what can we do to do things differently? Are we doing our job of making sure that these vulnerable individuals are being protected, both in our nursing homes and assisted living?
As for the agency, lawmakers are proposing combining it with other agencies to improve accountability and manageability. Because of our investigation, the Longhorn Village case we mentioned at the top of this report went to the Travis County Sheriff's Office for investigation. We're told it's now complete and in the hands of the district attorney. Brian Collister, KXAN Investigates.